2.2. Planning is everything. Despite a huge writing industry about how to be a professional writer, to which this book and my blog and podcast is clearly contributing, notions about the romance of writing persist. These ideas hang around in movies too. We all know the cliché of a writer with so-called writer's block. He has no idea what to write. He's stuck. He's frustrated. Okay, maybe it's a she, but we all know in the movies to date, it isn't. He's been scrunching up bits of paper and throwing them into an undersized waste paper basket, flowing with previous failed attempts. Then someone says something, or he sees a picture or pats a dog. There's a moment of clarity, some epiphany, and suddenly he runs to his computer, or typewriter ideally, otherwise why would he print stuff on all those pages and dramatically throw them away? And now our frustrated writer is grinning and typing and typing and grinning and typing and occasionally chuckling to himself. Maybe a long-suffering girlfriend puts a mug of coffee down beside him, which he glugs occasionally, and eventually he types, "The end." Ha! It's laughable, because it really doesn't happen like that. Correction, it doesn't ever happen like that. Admission. Okay, maybe a few times, but hardly ever. And we cling to the idea that the muse strikes and the script writes itself because it goes back to the myth that good writing is the work of insight and genius rather than tedious, annoying, hard work. Then there's the myth that once you have a decent idea, it writes itself. No, it doesn't. No matter how many times I've stared at a blank screen over the last 15 years, I have never seen a script write itself. It's not an option on Final Draft or on one of those document wizards on Microsoft Word, as suggested by an excellent Mitchell & Webb sketch about lazy writers. Given this romantic view of writing, or a highly mechanised one, you can start to think that you're doing it wrong if you spend ages planning and planning and planning, and that isn't somehow writing. It really is, and planning is normal. The likes of Carla Lane, bread, liver birds, butterflies, etc., can just sit down and type. Well, she was a genius. But for those of us who aren't, planning is critical. Richard Hurst and I have had the good fortune to be paid to write 3 series of Bluestone 4.2. For each script we talked and researched and talked and plotted and planned and redrafted plans and treatments and outlines. We usually started talking in January, running through the ideas and then outlining them, working out the balance of the series and gentle story arcs. We didn't start writing the scripts until April, and they were usually written fairly quickly because every single scene had been planned, and we know what each scene was trying to accomplish. Sitcom legend alert. A couple of years ago, I met one of my comedy heroes, Lawrence Marks, one half of Marks and Gran, who wrote The New Statesman, Birds of a Feather, and Shine on Harvey Moon, to name a fraction of their work I've actually seen. They also wrote Goodnight Sweetheart, which was a perfectly fine and successful show, but I don't think I ever saw an episode. Lawrence Marks said they would usually spend at least 75% of their time planning an episode before writing the script. That's a lot of time not writing a script. In the past, people marvelled that John Cleese and Connie Booth spent half their time writing Fawlty Towers working out the plots. This is probably a conservative estimate, but the point stands. It seems no coincidence to me that experienced writers advocate that planning is everything. Too soon. It's the easiest thing in the world to start writing a script or a novel or even a sketch, but finishing one is much harder. How many screenplays are started compared to the number that are finished? And the reason for this is often you've started writing too soon, or you've started by writing. You've got a great opening scene, you've set the scene, you've turned over a juggernaut and blown up a helicopter. You've grabbed our attention, but what's the story? Why am I going to spend 28 or 88 minutes watching this story? You need to know why, before you've even started to write the beginning. Of course, there's no harm in getting scenes down while they occur to you and while it's all very exciting. That's okay. But you want to be able to carry on in that vein. You've done a sprint, but you're a sitcom writer. You're not Usain Bolt. You're Mo Farah. Writing a script is the 5,000 metres. Writing a series is a marathon. And you don't just get up from the couch and run one of those. Besides, who's got so much time on their hands they can afford to get halfway through a script before realising it's not working and have to throw it away? This is time you could be spent eating crisps, playing computer games, or reading to your kids. It's a waste of time. So I'd leave writing an actual script of an episode until you know how it ends. You'll think of a better ending as you write the script, but if you don't have any ending when you start writing, you almost certainly won't think of one on the way. The importance of the story. Let's change metaphors from athletics to cars. Stories are the chassis on which the sitcom episode is built. It may seem an odd comparison to make since the chassis is such an unexciting part of the car compared to the bodywork and the engine, if you like that sort of thing. But I'd say the bodywork and gadgets are the jokes, and the engine is your cast of characters. Your characters are driving the show forward. They have wants and needs, not the same thing, obviously, and obligations. Actually, maybe the story is the road they're driving on? That would be more logical. I'll ignore that. I'm sticking with the chassis. I don't know much about cars, demonstrated by the cars I own, a Ford Mondeo, and have owned, a Volkswagen Golf, a Metro, a Peugeot 405 and a Peugeot 309. I had an accident in the Peugeot 309. A strong crosswind and standing water on the road caused aquaplaning at 60 miles an hour on a dual carriageway near Towcester. I hit the central reservation. The car was just about okay to drive to the hard shoulder, but it wasn't fixable, because the chassis had been damaged. And if the chassis is damaged, there's no point fixing the bodywork, mending the electrics and retuning the engine, because the vehicle is fatally flawed. In a sitcom, if your story isn't right, if it's not solid and sturdy, no amount of jokes or funny set pieces will be able to remedy the underlying weakness. You need a proper story structure. If a joke doesn't fire, that doesn't matter. Your script should have at least 100 of them, so another one will be along in a minute. Plus, it might be fixable quickly with a new joke or a line or a look or a cut. But if your character does something they would never do, that's really annoying, and will get in the way of the next 10 jokes at least. If that happens twice in 10 minutes, your viewer is probably going to switch over. If the story isn't going anywhere, your characters will have nothing to do. They'll just be swapping funny lines, which gets boring after a while. The audience will switch over, or at least the producer reading your script will give up and pick another one off the pile. If your episode ends with a massive coincidence that solves your two plots with a magic wand, known as Deus Ex Machina, your audience will feel cheated and might not tune in next week. The story is what allows the characters to move forward in a way that seems plausible, effortless and interesting, so they can be funny. And that's why I've really laboured this point. The story is essential and needs to be planned. We have some hard work ahead of us. I don't have any special secret knowledge on this or an inside track. I have a degree in theology from the University of Durham. I have no qualifications in screenwriting. I've never been on a course. I just have a few years of experience of sitting in windowless rooms with big white sheets of paper and filling them with ideas, bits, stories, set pieces and jokes, with arrows connecting them. Writing them all down, reassembling them, rewriting them, and then going over them again. I don't know of any shortcuts, and I don't think there are any. It just takes time. People assume that because it takes time, they must be doing it wrong. I tend to think the opposite way. If someone says a script took no time at all, or it wrote itself, or it was written in a night or a weekend, I'm very suspicious. They're either lying, or they really did write it from scratch in no time, in which case the odds are it's truly terrible, especially bearing in mind that Hemingway said the first draft of anything is shit, which is at least an improvement on how he first wrote that line. It's hard work, but conversely, you know when it's going well because it doesn't feel like work. When you're firing on all cylinders, writing lots of juicy comedy moments and jokes, you really do feel like you're being paid to join the dots. Where do these ideas come from? It's simple. A huge, long list of ideas you've already come up with. And on that list are some stories that just stand out. They're exciting, they feel fresh and new, and plotting them out feels like it could go in multiple directions, produce character conflicts and set-piece scenes we haven't seen before. How do we get that huge long list? Keep listening.